How's everybody doing this morning? My name is Eric Child. I am the CEO of a local company called FiberFix. How many people have heard of FiberFix? Anybody? A few people. Good. Most class looks like. I want to thank Professor Dyer for letting us come and spend just a few minutes with you today. Rather than sort of tell you what FiberFix is, I thought we'd show a quick video that kind of shows what it does. So I should you doing it real quick.
So what I just did was cut my bike in half, taped it back together with FiberFix. Now we're going to put it through a series of obstacles and see if it really is 100 times stronger than duct tape. So, as you can see, FiberFix.
Okay, so that's FiberFix. It is a fiberglass wrap that is blended with polyurethane, and when it cures, it's actually stronger pound for pound than steel. So this is a product we started working on about 1.5 years ago. We took it to market about 1 year ago officially, and you know, we got some really good traction in the market. Some good things happened, and because of that, we got to go on to ABC's Shark Tank. Anybody ever seen Shark Tank? The show? So we went in there in October. It's a show. If you haven't seen it, it's a show where you go before a panel of sharks, investors, and you try to pitch them on your business and try to get them to invest. And we did an investment. We did a deal with Lori Grenier. And since then, things have gone extremely well, and so they did a little follow-up on our company just last Friday night. I thought we might show you that too. It's pretty quick. You have that one?
Unfortunately, this one's not going to show.
Oh, that's not going to show? Okay, it's awesome.
We download it on iTunes, but don't plan on projecting here. So
Anyway, it kind of goes through, you know, our company and what we've done and so forth, But things have gone extremely well. We've actually just like I said, we've been in market for about 1 year. And in that time, we've gone nationwide at Home Depot, nationwide at Lowe's. We are in about half of the Ace Hardware stores. Those you have to close one at a time, so it's a little bit longer process. We're in about 500 or 600 True Value stores. We're rolling out now in Sam's Club. We're going to be rolling out in Target. We're going to be rolling out in Advanced Auto Parts, O'Reilly's. So things are going extremely well. And because of that, we're looking to grow, and we're looking for a couple of guys that we can bring in, guys, girls, we can bring in to help us grow the business to the next level. So we thought we'd come and tell you a little about FiberFix today, and just put it on your radar. Because I know a lot of you guys you have another year left, I think, right? So in some cases it might work, but anyway, we thought we'd at least put it on your radar. Just to give you a quick background on myself, I know a lot of you guys are preparing to go into consulting. That's kind of the track for this major. Is that right? And that's what I did. I actually went to work for Accenture right out of school, and worked in a small group that did Salesforce strategy and effectiveness for big banks, investment banks, financial institutions, Merrill Lynch, Goldman Sachs, Citibank, places like that. And spent about 3 years doing that. Then I went to business school at the University of Chicago, and I actually emphasized this strategy. And then went to work for a pretty big software company in the Bay Area in strategic alliances for a couple of years. And then I came back to Utah and helped start a company called Seastone, which was in the giftware category. We did little decorative boxes and packages for retail gift cards. And that was another business that grew really quickly. We actually got into most of the major retailers within just a couple of years. We grew it to about 20 million in sales over about 4.5 years. And we ended up selling that a few years ago. And the reason I tell that story is because during that time, as we were growing Seastone, I hired a guy who was just out of school. I think he'd been out of school for 1 year. He'd been working in China for a boat manufacturer. And we brought him in to a position we called project manager, which was an area where he could work on product development, account management, account development, business development, and he really helped us grow our business. And he worked with me there for, I think, 3 or 4 years. And then once he left Seastone, he went and started his own company called KT Tape. Has anybody heard of KT Tape? So KT Tape's another local success story. KT Tape has grown also to about that $20–25 million sales mark in the last 4 years or so. And they actually just sold a slight majority ownership of the company to a private equity group for a lot of money. And you know, the owners pocketed a lot of money in that transaction. And you know, the reason I tell you that story is because I know you guys are targeting consulting firms and all that kind of stuff, and I would never disparage that, because I did that myself and I had a blast. Consulting was a very good time. I really enjoyed it. I learned a ton. But I will tell you that I didn't learn nearly as much as I've learned, you know, operating businesses for myself and working in kind of an entrepreneurial environment. And there's just nothing quite like having your own business and watching it succeed, watching your product show up on shelves nationally, having people buy and use your product. There's just nothing quite like that. And I learned more I've learned so much more about overall strategy and business and competitors and everything else working in a small entrepreneurial environment than I ever did in consulting or in big corporate America. And you know, again, I sort of tell that story about Reed Quinn, who was the guy I was telling you about, who started KT Tape, because you know he came into our business just out of school basically, and you know, worked in an environment where he learned how to start his own business, how to grow his own business, and then he went and applied that, and he made a fortune doing it. And he and I are working together on this one as well. And then we've got Spencer and Derek and Chris, a few young guys working with us as well in this business. And I'm sure that Spencer can attest that it's been a big learning curve and a lot of growth professionally.
For sure. I mean, Professor Dyer's class is one of my favorite classes in the strategy program. And like to this day, I think of lessons that I learn in the strategy program every day. And partly the reason FiberFix took off so well is because of some of the lessons I've learned about associative thinking. The idea for FiberFix came from seeing products in different categories and bringing them all together. Medical casting tape applied to tools. And it's really because of that, innovating from within a company, looking for ways to challenge the status quo, looking for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats within any organization, and just capitalizing on those and making sure that you maintain your first mover advantage and totally capitalize on the opportunity. So strategy program has done wonders for me, and it's been a huge asset for me to start FiberFix.
Anyway.
Perfect timing on that, right? Yeah. We just barely did our session on associational thinking was last time, where we were starting to try and figure out how do we become more creative, strategic thinkers. So thank you. That's very perfect timing.
We
actually didn't plan this.
Anyway, I know that Professor Dyer didn't want to take too much time, so with that, we'll kind of wrap it up. But I just wanted to put a big plug out there for FiberFix. We're looking for a couple of really smart heads to help us grow this business. And if you're interested, please contact one of us, and we'll take a look. Is there any questions about our business or anything else that might be helpful before we let you get back to regular school?
What's the position? So describe what would be the responsibilities of
Yeah, so what we're looking
for the summer as well as full time.
Potentially. I mean, I think our primary interest is full time, but we would entertain an internship as well for the right candidate. What we're looking for, we don't exactly know what to call it. I mean, the thing that's funny is like titles belong to big companies, right? And in big companies, you're always trying to get the next title. I mean, you can move 5 titles up and never even see a pay raise, but it's interesting, right? That's how big businesses work. In small companies, nobody really cares about titles. It's just a bunch of guys in a street fight, and it's just a bunch of guys doing stuff, right? And but we will probably call this like project manager or account manager, something like that. And the primary responsibilities will be to work with our sales team on developing national accounts and developing potentially products down the road, market development, marketing initiatives. I mean, basically, we'll plug you into a lot of different things because, we'll need help in a lot of different areas. But like I said, the thing that's really cool about the position is you kind of get a front row seat on how to really successfully launch a business, be involved in it from the ground up, and see how this process works. So that at some point down the road, you can do it yourself. Because once you get the entrepreneurial bug, trust me, it'll never leave you. And you'll just become a serial entrepreneur. You'll just do this over and over and over. We all have done that. So that's what you'll find. Did I see a hand up here somewhere?
Didn't realize the email was right there, sorry.
Yeah, feel free to email hr@fiberfix.com. We'll get back with you really quick. So.
All right.
Thank you very much.
I was going to pass this around, but this is kind of our camera we use on the Shark Tank. We crack cinder blocks with it, but if anybody wants to check it out, they can. Yeah, you might. I'll leave it here, and you guys can pass it around, check it out if you want to. And, Tice will bring it back when it comes into that. So.
Thanks.
Thanks, Professor.
Thank you. Okay, so this is actually one of the things that we hope you will all do as you go out, you work for, whatever companies you're working for, that you find opportunities to come back and give other students opportunities like the ones that you hopefully received from that program. And fortunately, we're building more and more of these kinds of experiences, and we want to have a wide variety, because if you look at where our students have gone the first 5 years, about 25 to 27, 20% tend to go into management consulting of some type. So that's less than a third. We tend to have about a third that will go into sort of general management or work in a corporate planning position for a company. So some sort of a management position, and then we tend to have about 10 to 15% who go to more of an entrepreneurial startup or product development kind of position. We have maybe 10% that will go into a financial services firm like a Goldman Sachs or a Credit Suisse, and we tend to have then a few that go to Teach for America. Actually, we've had quite a number of our grads go. I think we've had 10 go to Teach for America. And some go to graduate school. So management consulting is actually a relatively, there's only about a fourth of where folks will go from here, and we expect hopefully people are going to a lot of different kinds of opportunities with your degree. All right, so we're gonna spend some more time today talking about the personal characteristics of innovators, and we'll get to the assessments a little bit more shortly. Let me turn off my thing so we don't have to see that Corey Wright is online. Corey Wright is actually the founder of Movie Mouth. You'll read about him in the Observing chapter. All right, so here we're going to talk about questioning first. So we want to talk about the sort of the four behaviors. Remember, I was telling you the bottom line of what we learned about creative strategic thinkers are that you've got to act different if you want to think different. And so this is the associating is what produces the ideas. These four behaviors are really critical to generating and triggering new associations. And so that's why you got to think about, if I'm trying to solve a problem, how can I act differently so that I can generate more, trigger new associations so that I can think differently? All right, so here we have Dilbert and his buddy meets with the boss, and his buddy says, since our bonuses depend on things we can't control, can mine be based on the performance of some other company? That's thinking outside the company, right? Of course, he says you ask one question, suddenly you're not a team player. But it is true, he's questioning and challenging the status quo. Most people don't get performance evaluations or bonuses depending on the performance of other companies. At least he's trying something new. So what's the point here? Well, you're actively trying to question the status quo. That's really an important part of the kind of questioning we're talking about. It's why do we do things this way? And you're trying to understand what a problem is and what a problem is not. You're trying to make sure, in most cases, innovation is all about solving a problem and solving it in a new way. David Neeleman, the founder of JetBlue, told us, one of my strengths, I think, is the ability to look at a process that's been in place for a long time and ask, why don't they do it this other way? And sometimes I find myself thinking the answer's so obvious, I wonder, why has no one else ever thought of this before? So we said, so David, give us an example of what you're talking about. He said, well, my first startup was a charter airline called Morris Air. Actually started here in Salt Lake City. And at the time, this is well before your time, airline tickets were treated like cash. There was no such thing as an electronic ticket. And so when you got your ticket, it's like you know how you get a gift card or something, if you lose it, you've lost money? Just like that. So people had to be very careful not to lose their airline tickets. So this creates problems for both sides because people do lose their airline tickets, and then they're calling in, they're irate, they got to get on the plane, they're upset that they've lost this. And one day, one of his employees has taken one of these calls, and he's just like, man, this is such a hassle that we treat airline tickets like money. And Neeleman said, when he said that, for some reason I just asked myself, why do we treat airline tickets like money? And then he said, my follow-up question was, how else could we treat them? And he said, within 5 minutes, I come up with this idea to give our customers a code that they could use at the airport, show their ID, and we'd let them on the plane. And he said that was the birth of e-tickets. He said we started it there. He said the problem he says is we don't get credit for it. He says the reason we don't get credit for it is that Southwest Airlines acquired us. So Southwest Airlines then adopted it, and Southwest Airline gets all the credit for launching e-tickets to the airline industry because they were the first bigger player to do it. But it's just sort of asking a simple question, why don't we do it this other way? We learned some interesting things as we studied these business innovators about the characteristics of sort of good questions. And I want to introduce just a couple of these to you. We'll spend more time on this later on in the course. One thing we learned is actually good questions impose constraints on your thinking. Let me give you an example. What if we were legally prohibited from conducting any future business with our current set of customers? How would we make money next year? Can you do business as usual? If someone, your boss asked this question. So this was a question that was actually used by one of the innovators that we studied. The person was looking for some new innovative growth ideas for the company. And this was a question that imposed a constraint, and then you have to try and think around the constraint. In fact, one of Google's primary principles of innovation is creativity loves constraint. And the reason it does, you've heard necessity is the mother of invention. It's when you've got a roadblock, now you have to think around it. And the process of thinking around the roadblock can sometimes produce some creative ideas. Of course, we also learned that the flip of this is true. Good questions also can eliminate constraints on your thinking. So Steve Jobs was known to like to ask this question. What if money were no object? What kind of product would we create? Think about what this does. You now move to think about what is the perfect product. Now, the iPod was definitely a move in the right direction compared to the Discman. You guys remember the Discman? So I remember, jogging with the Discman, the good old days when, you had this big thing, your songs would skip. You had basically one CD you could listen to. So, the iPod, to be able to put all of your library, your songs on a single device, put it in your pocket, it's pretty good. But imagine that you were at Apple today and Steve Jobs asked this question. In your experience, is the Apple portable music experience perfect? No? What could make it better? Yes?
If you didn't have to download songs, you just had all of them available ever for a period all the time.
Okay, so you would want the portable music. So one thing you'd like to make it better is I want any song, anytime, any place. Yeah, what else could make it better?
Hands-free selection.
I want hands-free selection. Yeah, I want to be able to say or better think of the song I want to listen to. And then say or think play. And then what do I want to hear? I want to hear the song, and I want stereo. Right? I don't want those earbuds. The earbuds aren't, that's not, at least for me, I don't know if you feel the same way, but earbuds are far from a perfect way of actually getting the music to your ears. Yeah.
They have those life-proof cases, so it's like waterproof, dirt-proof, like everything proof. I'd like the phone to become more life-proof.
You want it more okay, so are you getting the idea of how this works? So now you imagine the perfect product. Take off the constraints. Technology, money, let's just think about what's the perfect product. Okay, now, how close can we get to that? Because now technology and money is a barrier, right? But now we think about how close we can get to that perfect experience. That's one of the ways that Apple has made its living over the last decade, is trying to imagine the perfect product and then trying to get as close as they can get. Okay, and that's the kind of question that helps get you there. The questioning, it's challenging the status quo, it's imposing or eliminating constraints, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later too. It's also now starting to get the what if going. It's the imagining a new future, in a bit the way we just were doing. It's what if we tried this, what if we tried this. One of the things that good innovators are good at doing is imagining a new future and asking a lot of what if we tried this, what might happen. All right, let's talk about observing. I want to start on observing and introduce a key idea with a clip from Tom Kelly. He is a general manager at IDEO. IDEO is has won more innovation design prizes than any other company in the world, known as being one of the best innovation design firms. And he's going to talk about the importance of observing at IDEO.
We got approached by one of the largest oral health care companies in America, a company you've probably heard of called Oral-B. And they said, look, we'd like a new kid's toothbrush because ours is starting to get commoditized. It looks like a lot of kids' toothbrushes out there, and you can't have that. We want to be special, right? So we say, okay, we'll do this. We want to go out in the field and do some field research. And they're kind of not sure about that. Like, it's not rocket science. We're talking about kids brushing their teeth. How hard could that be, right? They would really like us to stop fooling around and start designing, right? But we want to go through this process, this observation process, because we think almost always you can spot opportunities. And so we go out, and we're on like the first day of observations, and we make a small discovery. The small discovery we make is that every kid's toothbrush in the history of the world has had the same implicit assumption. It's a logical assumption, it just isn't exactly right. Which is, the assumption always was, parents have big hands, kids have small hands, and so when you want to make the kid's version, make it like the parents' brush, only smaller and skinnier. Perfectly logical, until you go out in the field. Until you actually watch humans, little tiny humans, while brushing their teeth. And what you notice right away, you get a 5-year-old boy brushing his teeth, he's not holding his toothbrush in his fingertips the way mom and dad do, he's fisting it. He's holding it like this because he doesn't have the dexterity, he doesn't have the fine motor controls that his parents have, and so he's got to hold it like this. In fact, the other thing he does is he holds the brush too far up very frequently, and so he's punching himself in the face as he's trying to brush his teeth, and we solved that problem too. But the main thing was, came back in the field and said, uh-oh, kids don't need little skinny toothbrushes, kids need big fat toothbrushes, right? Let's make them big fat squishy toothbrushes. And you may have noticed, now every toothbrush company in the world makes these, but our client reports that after we made that little tiny discovery, out in the field, sitting in a bathroom watching a 5-year-old boy brush his teeth, they had the best-selling kids' toothbrush in the world for 18 months. So when you think about power, when you think about credibility, if you could go out in the field and do that observation and come up with that finding, and your company, your organization was the best in its field for 18 months afterwards, would that be worth it? I think that would be worth it. And so that's this message about think like a traveler, be an anthropologist, use your powers of observation, have that part of your brain turned up as high as you can all along.
All right. So what are some tricks to being a better observer? Because if you're like me, a lot of times, I'm like going about my work and I've got blinders off. So if you're more of an executor, you don't take time to observe usually, because unless it's very clear that you have a specific thing to learn from an observation, and you're doing it as part of an assignment or something that you're supposed to do, but you don't just sort of take time to observe. Innovators are much more likely to just take time to observe. Now, what are we looking for? Well, they're trying to understand, especially when you're observing customers, the job to be done. So what is the job to be done? And we've talked about that, and you understand that people hire products and services to do a job for them. And why? Well, we're trying to gain insights for new ways of doing things by finding the surprises. What was the surprise for the IDEO team?
Kids don't hold their toothbrush.
Yeah, kids don't hold their toothbrushes the same way. I mean, this seems like a fairly simple surprise. But when you're observing, it's the surprises that will help you to learn something that could lead to a valuable new way of learning or doing things. All right, so let's take a GE CT scanner. What's the job to be done by a CT scanner? Anybody want to? What's the job?
Internal issues.
Okay, so it is clear image in your body, and who needs this information? Doctor or physician. Seems relatively straightforward, right? That the job to be done is give me a clear picture of what's going on inside someone's body. All right, so Doug Dietz, who is one of the lead designers at GE, he happens to be in a hospital. He's in the scanner area because he's going and looking and just talking to people about how their scanners are working. And as he's having this experience, he hears a young girl crying. And actually not just crying, but really like screaming, crying, like almost hysterical. And here's what he says about it: is he tries to understand what's going on, why this is happening.
Why I really wrapped myself around this and tried my best to pull in some of the best people that I could to work with me is that I always kept in my mind that frightened child that was going through cancer or that was really having some problems going through their scan. And that is such a tough thing for a little one. It's such a tough thing for a family. And I did put my heart and soul behind it. And it means a lot to me now that we have a solution, and that the solution is helping the way it is, and it's helping these families.
All right, so he hears the child crying. He goes, he finds out 80% of kids under the age of 8 have to be sedated in order for them to go into the CT scanner and for you to get a clear scan, because the subject has to hold still, right? So he's now got a different problem. How do I get a child to hold still in a CT scan? But now the job to be done is a little different, right? It's not just for the physician, and it is for the physician, but unless I can work this out for the patient, then there's a job to be done for the patient too that he didn't appreciate before. So you want to realize there could be jobs to be done for multiple different entities that are related to a product or service. And this is what they came up with: the GE Adventure Series scanners. And they went and they observed, where do kids go and explore in a new place without being afraid? And they found science museums, children's museums, right? They'll go, and if it looks like a fun adventure, they'll go climb it. Kids will climb in that. That looks fun. And what they did is they created then for every child that's going to get a scan, they receive, before they get to the hospital, their adventure packet that describes the adventure they're going on. People that go into this one are flying into space, of course. So you're going to have to crawl into the space module. You're going to have to hold still while you fly. And they're going to have music and other things that are going to go with it, and then you are going to fly into space. Or maybe you will go under the sea on a submarine, or maybe you will go on a pirate ship. There are a variety of different adventures that they create for these kids. What do you think happens to sedation rates? Plummets, right? Because all of a sudden the kids aren't scared. This doesn't look like something that's really weird or scary to them. This now looks like something that's kind of cool. And so they design it, it does a different job, and I can tell you, I did a speech for the Children's Hospital Association in the US. These are like primary children's hospitals. They're clamoring, they're all buying these scanners because it's been so successful at reducing sedation rates. That's costly and time consuming, so it also brings down costs for the hospitals. All right, Scott Cook, the founder and CEO of Intuit, they make Quicken, QuickBooks, TurboTax. He said, the only way I know how to teach people to be innovative is to teach them how to observe and ask just one question that often generates surprising responses. What's different than you expected? So the key is, as you're observing, you're trying to figure out what's different than you expected. He says this is hard to do because when you observe something, if you see something you didn't expect, your mind will tell you to ignore it because it's not expected. You focus on what you do expect, what conforms to what you sort of expect reality to be. So you're actually looking for the unexpected. And that's why Intuit has done a good job of sending people, they follow their customers home, they open their software, they put it in, and they watch them use it. And when they do something that wasn't expected, then it's like, oh, what's the surprise? How do we design the software differently? Because they didn't use it the way we expected them to use it. Let me give you another example. This is from Innovators Accelerator, that innovation course. And this is Hal Gregerson talking about an observation that was made by someone over in another part of the world.
The other day I was talking about this, and I was in South Africa. I was talking about it and explaining observation, what it meant. And after the session, somebody came up and he said, you know, let me tell you about a story that is just exactly what you're talking about. In South Africa, it's warm, they have citrus groves, and they grow lots of oranges and other kinds of citrus fruits. A company called Cedar Citrus had an employee by the name of Andries Fixter. Andries Fixter's job basically was to watch the groves to make sure nothing bad happened to the fruit. So he's doing his job. He's kind of watching the groves. Now they've got a problem in South Africa, which is they have baboons that love to steal things. And if you've ever been there, they'll steal your purse, they'll steal anything that's around. And the baboons love to steal the fruit. And so Andries Fixter is watching the baboons, watching their patterns of action, watching which trees they're stealing from, and realizes there's a consistent thing going on here. What they realized was, Andries noticed that they were stealing it from one single tree. He's like, why? Walks up to the tree. First of all, it's like, this does not make sense, because all of the oranges were just bright green. They were not orange, which meant to him, in his head, they're not ripe. Pulls one off, peels it, opens it up, and instantly he notices this smells like a very ripe piece of fruit. And it was juicy when he opened it. So then he tasted it, and it was the juiciest piece of orange he ever had in his life. The baboons knew where the good fruit was. Andries Fixter watched it, and what they realized, they didn't know they had a very rare kind of citrus tree that actually was early ripening and had incredibly delicious fruit. Now the growing season for South Africa is usually one season per year. With this early growing season, with this early ripening fruit that Andries Fixter discovered, they could get 2 seasons, not 1. That's competitive advantage. They cloned the tree, and they were able basically to have groves of these trees that were incredibly successful.
See, That is better than me standing up here, isn't it? You can show all that stuff on. All right. So, what's the point? So observing is you're looking for surprises. You're looking for the unexpected, and that's when you want to dig. You want to peel the onion when you see something that's unexpected. Then you go try and dig deep to try and understand it, and that might lead to some learning, some knowledge that could be valuable. And that's really one of the key skills to observing. And you're trying to observe the world in a variety of ways to learn new ways of doing things. All right, let's talk about networking, which is the next skill.
Hello, I'm a Mac, and I'm a PC. We've got a little network going here, and it was very easy to set up. We speak each other's language. We share our internet connection and all sorts of things we do together. Who's this now?
This is that new digital camera from Japan. It just came out.
Hajimemashite.
Hajimemashite. Yoroshiku onegaishimasu.
Wait. Do you speak her language?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Everything just John works with a Mac. Arigato.
Buongiorno. Hello.
All right. He's trying to network and connect, but he wasn't sort of part of the direct network, so he can't get like the pictures that she pulls out. And that's part of what we think about as really the value of networking, is that you connect with someone who can bring you some knowledge or resource that you wouldn't get if you weren't connected. And so if we think about networking, what are we trying to do? We're trying to actively seek diverse ideas to gain a new perspective. And that means we got to talk to people who can bring a different perspective. Pierre Omidyar, the founder of eBay, told us, he said, I usually look for insights from unusual places. He said the cliche would be, rather than talking to the CEO, I'd want to talk to someone in the mailroom. I like talking to people that have diverse backgrounds. So you're trying to talk with people who can bring a different perspective to the issues that you're facing. So you're trying to see if you can find and talk to someone who might be different on what kinds of dimensions. What do you think might be dimensions that people would differ from you? Age? Okay. Experience in what way? Industry. So you might talk to people that have different industry experience. Yeah.
Cultural background. Different
cultural backgrounds. They've grown up in a different country. Yeah.
Occupations.
Yeah, they're in a very different profession or occupation than you. What else? What are ones that are hard to get here at BYU? Different religious background, different ethnic background, right? People with different religious and ethnic backgrounds are probably going to see things differently than you will. So when you're in a company, different functions of the company, right? Different, whether it's marketing or operations or HR or finance or people that work in different functions, are going to bring a different perspective. Different geographic locations. Yeah, even in the United States, there are differences in regions of the country, right? Okay, so that's what we're talking about with networking. We'll talk about that more later on in the class. So this is one of the early experiments in transportation, and they learned this was not the best way to get Thor down the mountain. But sometimes you got to run the experiment, right? You got to test it to see whether it will work or not. Okay, so this is the classic way that we tend to think about experimenting, is that it's all about testing a hypothesis with a pilot or a prototype. And that was actually one of the important things we learned about innovators. They did do this. But we found they not only test ideas, but experimenting, and as you'll see this in your own assessment, experimenting also involves seeking new experiences, learning new skills, taking things apart, putting them back together. So experimenters tended to do all of those things. So part of why I'm trying to give you a sense for each of these is that as you look at your own assessment and why you are maybe strong or weak in particular areas, you have a better sense of what people who are really good at these things tend to do and how they might be different from you. So this is a guy named Nate Alder. Anybody heard of Nate Alder? Nate Alder actually was a snowboard instructor here in Utah. And he decided he was going to pick up a new hobby, scuba diving. So he went and he did some dives. He did some dives around the world. And he learned about the suits that you'd wear. And actually, does anybody know what those canisters are? It's argon gas. So this is not actually, yeah, this is the, they would use these to put them actually into the suits to keep you warm when you're doing the deep, colder dives. So he's very intrigued by argon gas. I mean, of course, in the wrong conditions, it can blow you up, but it can also keep you warm. And so he's really interested because he starts to ask himself, I wonder if there's any way that these argon gases could be used to keep me warm when I'm up freezing my buns off at the, in the ski resort teaching snowboarding lessons on these really cold days. So he does some experimenting. He takes apart the suit, tries to understand how it works, and he comes up with an idea of using the canisters to fill up these little riveted in these jackets and actually in blankets. He does it in a variety of products now, and he calls it climate products, KLYMIT. You can jump online and you can see the kinds of products that they sell. But by learning a new skill, trying out, seeking new experience, then sort of taking it apart, trying to figure out how and why the argon gases work with wetsuits, he was then able to come up with an idea of how to put the argon gas into essentially a dry jacket. What you think of as a dry jacket or a blanket. And from what I understand, this is one of the warmest ways. If you're going to be in the cold, it's very warm and it's very light. And you actually fill it up with the canisters. You fill it with the argon gas, and I think it works like 6 to 8 hours. And then this is a very different way to keep you really warm. So key then is to think about, how do I try new things on a regular basis? Jeff Bezos at Amazon, he told us, one of the things we've tried to do at Amazon is reduce the cost of conducting experiments. If you can increase the number of experiments you try from 100 to 1,000, you dramatically increase the innovations that you produce. So, and if you think about a company like Amazon, you see all of the new different things they've tried. So they started out as a book retailer, then they go to online, selling lots of things online. They become a market maker online, where basically they just help with the transaction, but another seller selling to their customers. They have moved into books, the Kindle, book readers, and tablets. They've moved into web hosting services and a variety of web services. They're doing grocery delivery with Amazon Fresh. Now is one of their new things. I don't know if you saw the thing where they were experimenting with the drones, taking things to people's doors. This is a company that likes to try new things. And it really starts with Bezos saying, we're going to try lots of experiments. So one of the things they like to say at Amazon is, let's run the experiment. Let's run it, let's see what we learn. So experimenting then is learning new skills, taking apart products, ideas, processes. It's piloting ideas to test your hypotheses and to answer questions that you can't really answer very well through observing or networking. Okay? So these 4 behaviors are the things that tend to trigger new associations and produce creative ideas. So as you look at sort of your own skill set, you want to look at, to what extent am I good at questioning and observing, experimenting, networking to help turbocharge my creative thinking? To what extent do I engage in those behaviors as I'm trying to solve a problem? And that, hopefully, if the more I do those things, the more likely I am to trigger new ideas that will help me to be a creative problem solver. All right. So now let's move to your assessments. We'll talk about those. If you've got it, you might pull it up. I want to share a couple of things before we sort of look at your assessment. So we have really these, what we think of as these are actually 5 skills on the discovery side. And we've talked about these: questioning, observing, experimenting, networking, associating. And we have 4 skills that we call delivery skills or execution skills. And these are analyzing, planning, being very detail-oriented and self-disciplined. So, analyzing. This means you are very careful in your analysis before you make a decision. You are not someone who jumps into things quickly without doing some analysis. You rely more on facts and realism as opposed to intuition and gut instinct. Okay? That's a lot more comfortable for you if you're an analyzer. If you have a hard time making decisions because you're not sure you have all the facts quite yet, you're an analyzer. Okay? And by the way, so I'm actually, this is an area where I tend to be high. This is a good way to drive your spouse crazy. Is that like you always need more information or more data or whatever to make decisions. You always have to wait till the last. I need a little bit more data before you're going to make a decision, even with things that don't seem like they're that important. Planning. This is, basically, this is people who actually plan ahead. People who are organized. People who are orderly. Okay, are good on the planning side. Detail-oriented means you cross the T's, you dot the I's. You like to have things just so, right? You have some perfectionist tendencies. Okay, and self-discipline. You don't procrastinate things. When something comes up, you got to get it done. You jump in, you plow through it. If you have to stay up late to finish an assignment, you stay up late. If you have to stay up all night to do it and do a good job, you do it. You're self-disciplined. That's just the way you are. Okay? So, we've used those skills to come up with this 2x2 of discovery skills and delivery skills. And if you are high on discovery skills and low on delivery skills, this whole area is your innovators, but this is your focused innovator. Really good at the discovery stuff, not so good at the execution stuff. Here, of course, you're really good at the discovery stuff, and you're okay at the execution stuff. Developers are folks who are good at not only developing ideas and building on others' ideas, but they're also good at developing plans and moving them forward. People in management often tend to fall here, just so you know, in most organizations. They're ease, and it depends on the area. If you are more in finance or accounting, you're going to be more this way. And if you're going to be more in a marketing function or business development function, you may be more this way. And if you're more in an R&D function, product development, you may have leaders that are more in this part of the 2x2. So executors are down here. Focused executors, low on discovery here, and those who are mostly executors and fairly good at innovation tend to fall here. Now, I want to, it's important to understand something about this 2x2. So for just a moment, let's imagine those of you in here who are in this area, you're an I in some way, you've been asked to leave the room. Okay? So now those of us who are E's, we can talk about you. So, what kind of adjectives, those of you who are in the E's, what kind of adjectives might you use to talk about people that you know who are I's and low on E? What's that? Flaky. Okay? Flaky. What? Eccentric. Right? Flaky, eccentric. What else? Dreamers. Right? Anything else? Yes? Impractical. Scatterbrain. All right. Is being a dreamer a good thing?
Yes.
It might be. Is being scatterbrained a good thing? impractical doesn't strike, is not really your, you get this interesting mix of sort of positive, a little bit of a positive connotation. But there's a lot of stuff that's not so positive, right? It's like harebrained. I mean, that's what, you get sort of this sort of wild, crazy, dreamers, flaky, that kind of stuff comes out too. All right, now let's reverse it. We've just sent the E's out, the focused executors. Those of you who are in the I space, what are the adjectives that you use to describe the E's?
Stiff.
Stiff. Okay, stiff. What else?
Boring.
Boring. What else? OCD. That's obsessive compulsive disorder. Okay, things have to be a certain way, right? What else?
It's generally insufferable.
What's that? Generally insufferable. I mean, so it's this reliable, predictable, boring. I've heard anal retentive, right? All of that sort of goes into this space of, this is the way I's often perceive E's. Okay, so now, the question is, which skill set is more important to the success of an organization? Yeah, it's very hard to say we want all dreamers or we want all anal retentive, predictable executors, right? Now, to be honest, the fastest way to go out of business is don't execute. And that's why when you look at where companies tend to hire and what they hire for, they tend to hire down here. They're looking for people who can execute and get things done. Hard to assess this stuff. And these folks tend to be a little bit more impractical and less able to focus and get things done. Actually, you find many people like David Neeleman are attention deficit, who are sometimes up in this space of being more innovators. And the fact that their mind bounces around to a bunch of different things means that oftentimes they come up with new ideas, but they have a harder time focusing and following through and getting things done. Brandon.
Speaking of hard to assess, I'd like to know kind of how this survey worked exactly, just because I feel like half the questions were really hard to answer. Like some were, how often do you ask probing questions that make people uncomfortable every day, every week? Like, I don't know, I try not to do that. Yeah. I'll make up an answer to entertain the survey. I just wonder how much that affected my score.
So this is an imperfect instrument. However, this instrument has been tested and used with over probably 8,000-9,000 people. And Brandon, if that makes you uncomfortable, then you are different actually than someone else who actually likes to ask questions that make people feel uncomfortable. There are people out there that actually like to ask questions that make people uncomfortable. Have you met those people? Sometimes. So in fact, that reveals something about you. If you're like, I don't want to ask questions that make people uncomfortable, because that's not really people who understand. And this is actually sort of an important issue, and I'll try and provide a couple of other articles on this. We're going to do a case on the Big Idea Group. Big Idea Group is a company that was launched a few years ago by a guy named Mike Collins. He went to Harvard Business School. He met Clayton Christensen. And we had a chance to study him as part of this project and people in this company. Mike said when he was at the Harvard Business School, he said most people in their program, he estimated it at 80 to 85%, were sort of your left-brained, logical, linear thinkers, your analyzers. He said there were about 10, 15, 20%, he said, of us who were more the mavericks. And he said we usually figured out who we were. But he says what you often find with someone who thinks differently like that is they have a hard time saying socially appropriate things. But a lot of times things will come out, and he says we have to learn. We have to be careful. We have to learn when it's okay and when it's not, because a lot of times we want to ask questions that people would think are not appropriate questions to ask, or we want to say things, and he says these things a lot of times they just come out. But he said some people are just more like that. So the reason I share that is simply to say we've tested this with a lot of folks, and what we found is that it's certainly not a perfect predictor of where you would fall here. But generally speaking, if you're honest, and what actually you want to do, the better measure of where you are is if you do a 360. So if you're in an organization, you've worked with people for a long time, you have your boss, your peers, your direct reports all assess you as well. And then, because sometimes you might see yourself one way and really you're not as much that way. Usually the self-assessment, though, is a pretty good predictor of where you're at. But the correlation between the self-assessment and a team assessment, a 360 assessment, is very high. The R-square is probably about 0.7, which is actually, pretty good, pretty high. So it's for people who are honest and understand themselves, but then there are like 10-15% who think they're one way, but everybody else actually will say you're different than you think. So it's not a perfect predictor. Question, Austin?
I just had an example. It's kind of funny. When I first met who is now my mother-in-law, I asked if some of her kids, if they were planning on having kids because they've been married for a few years. Because in my family, that was a totally normal question. And she very strictly told me that was none of her business. And I was like, whoa, because I'm just asking questions. I'm more of a developer, and I ask a lot of questions. I like to ask questions. And I realized that not everybody's like that. I'm in a new family now where they don't ask certain questions. And they don't talk
certain
about
things
it.
are not.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, okay.
Yeah, and this is this is stuff you got to learn before you totally tick off your mother-in-law, right? But this is this is where family cultures are very different. Some families you don't ask certain questions. They're not viewed as appropriate, and this is why some people are more willing to ask questions than others. So other people have asked me, so how much better can I get? Really? I mean, can this make a difference? When I started, I was about right here. Now I'm up here. So I started as an E+I. I tend to be more execution-oriented with some innovation capabilities. Over the last 5 or 6 years, this project has actually made a big difference in my ability to try new things and to think differently. And you see this product that was created. So I actually tend to be fairly risk averse. So I don't want to start my own company and lose everything. I don't want to live day to day. I mean, that's just not me. I mean, I'm a professor, right? I have 10 years. That's for me out. You can't get more risk averse than that, right? But, you're trying to be a professor and you get tenure, and man, then they can't fire me unless I do something really bad. So I'm not particularly risk averse, and yet in the last 5-6 years I've launched some new products. This is one of them that you've experienced, and I may actually I'd like to get your feedback, and we'll put together a little survey to get your feedback on the assessment to see what you would recommend we could do to improve that product. You've seen little clips of the Innovators Accelerator, this new product innovation course. You've seen the animations that we put together for this class. I wrote probably half the scripts for the animations. And so now I'm involved in actually launching a lot of new educational products and learning tools that I think are somewhat innovative and new. And it wasn't something that, I would say for the most part I was good at figuring out what to get done, and then I was very good at executing. But I've really improved my ability to be to ask questions and to observe and to try new things. And so I can sort of personally say that it's made a difference for me. And as we go through some of the rest of the sessions, I'll try and share a little bit from others. I don't think you move from the low end of the bell curve to the high end of the bell curve. We do all have some of the anchor weight of genetics. Some of us actually do tend to be more divergent thinkers more naturally, more right-brained, to use that terminology. Some of us have grown up in family environments, or for whatever reason, we've grown up in environments where this sort of like questioning was not encouraged. It makes you uncomfortable. It's hard. You don't just change. Someone in your spouse's family isn't just all of a sudden going to become comfortable asking questions that challenge the status quo or sort of new, different ways of thinking of things. So for many of you, it will feel very uncomfortable. But I have seen people make quite a bit of progress.
Just
Yes.
along with that, my spouse has actually grown a lot, and she's actually learned to ask questions that she's wanted to ask before. It's been really interesting watching her. So, like, is it possible? Yeah. Like, she wouldn't have normally asked questions, and now she asks me about my family and stuff that she didn't ask at first. And not because I'm forcing her to, but she's learning that, like, I have this question, and I'm actually allowed to ask that.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's actually really interesting. Totally
Yeah, so other
change.
people encouraging and nourishing makes a big difference. So, all right, so let's move on. So what you're going to see, of course, is you're going to see your discovery skills and where you fall. And as you click through, it's going to show you down here, where are your skills relative to the average of successful innovators. Successful innovators are those people who have launched a new business, either a startup or in a corporation, or have invented a new product. So you might think of that's a fairly high standard, but that's who you're being compared to. Okay, but I know many of you have that sort of aspiration. And you're going to find that you're going to have a different mix. Some of you are going to be good at some things and not good at other things. And that's okay. You're not expected to be good at all of the 5 skills, the discovery skills, or even all of the 4 execution skills. Let me share a little bit of data. So if you compare innovators and non-innovators, of course, these are people who started that new business or invented a new product, and these are people who haven't. Of course, we see quite a bit of difference across the discovery skills overall. But when you look at individuals, and this is Mike Lazardis, he was the founder of Research in Motion. He's the one that created the BlackBerry, first BlackBerry. Pierre Omidyar started eBay, Scott Cook, Intuit, Michael Dell, of course, Dell, compared to non-innovators. And the point here is actually you see quite a bit of variance across the different 5 skills. Yes?
So I'm just noticing that, like, the 5 people that you have up there who are 4 people who've all, like, invented something or created a product, they all, like, are relatively poor at experimenting. And that seems like unintuitive. People who are launching new products without doing
Except for Michael Dell.
Yeah.
But that's not really what their strength is. They're not as strong at that. And the point is, I could have picked a lot of others, and you're going to see variance here, you see variance. This just happens to be that they happen to be close on observing. But the point is, you actually see a variance. Some people are much more comfortable with observing. Scott Cook, he said, is very comfortable with observing. He says that's kind of how he gets ideas. But, when you look at networking or experimenting, or even associating, not as strong at some of those areas. Michael Dell actually uses experimenting and networking a lot to try and come up with new ideas. Jeff Bezos is really a great experimenter, not on here, but experimenting is sort of his thing, really good at that. So you don't have to be good at all of the skills. You just have to find 1 or 2 that can help you to come up with good new ideas. And by the way, if you think about the what you really, you have to be, questioning is often the start of the process. So we've sort of redone this. Questioning is sort of the start. It gets you started. You engage these behaviors to come up with ideas, and then it helps produce the associations. So you want to be good at questioning. You got to work at questioning. And then we want you to make sure that you try and build on your strength in one of these next 3 skills. So for you, if you're comfortable, for me personally, I'm most comfortable with networking as a way to get ideas. If I need a new idea, I want to talk to a bunch of people. Because for me, I like talking to people, it feels comfortable, it seems efficient, I get a lot of different perspectives quickly. And so when I want new ideas, networking is sort of my go-to skill. I don't feel as comfortable with observing. I don't have the patience. This is the execution part of me. And I also tend to be very thoughtful about my executing, about my networking. So many good eyes, when they sit by somebody in a plane, they will talk to whoever they're talking to on the plane. And I've had 2 or 3 say, I actually started talking to somebody and came up with an idea for a product or a business, or we actually started a business together. Some of them they just met, sitting next to on a plane. And for me, usually when I get on a plane, I like get out my work, and I start working, and it's very clear to the people next to me, I'm not visiting. I am working, right? I've got stuff to do. That's the executor side of me. And the probability of meeting somebody who will give me a new product idea is low enough that I often won't try it, right? Whereas people who are true eyes, they'll do that. You know, they don't have something to execute on right now. They want to, they want to meet the person and find out what they're up to and ask them questions. And so it's often a different way of thinking about networking. But as we go through the next few sessions, we're going to talk about how you work to build on each of these skills. You can get better at all of them, but you want to start with your strongs. Between observing, networking, experimenting, and if you look at the very end of your assessment, it says pick one of those 3. Start with an acronym 1, observing, networking, experimenting. Pick on the one that's the strongest and start and build that one. Then go to your next strongest. So this is a strengths-based approach. Don't start with your weakest areas. Build on your strengths. Those will be the more likely ways you'll come up with new ideas. Because if you are not comfortable talking to people and you're not naturally a networker, start building on the skill that feels more comfortable, and then over time, hopefully you can build on the skills where you feel less comfortable. Does that make sense? All right. And by the way, this shows their delivery skills, and again, you can see they're all over the board. And not as good on delivery. Now let me just share a little bit of data here. The leaders of innovative companies. These are companies that have been in the top 100 most innovative companies on the Forbes list that we create each year, that we started 3 years ago when we published Innovators DNA. They're really good at discovery, and they're only a little better than average on the delivery stuff. Leaders of non-innovative companies. Not so good at discovery, really good at the execution stuff. So what's the point? There's a point here that I think is actually important. The founder CEOs at innovative companies tend to be I+Es. So all of those folks I just showed you, the Jeff Bezoses of the world, Mark Benioff, founder of Salesforce.com, a lot of those folks, on average, they tend to be I+Es. Where do you think the CEO of a non-innovative company falls? They're E+Is. Okay? Or at the edge of developer, Now, interesting thing though is, where do you think the next layer down at a non-innovative company or a typical company, where do you think they fall? So the business unit manager, CEO, then you got a business unit manager who runs a business unit or division.
I think they're hardcore E's.
Hardcore, they're actually just a little bit below. And functional managers, head of operations, marketing, finance, a little bit below that. Now here's what's really interesting. Even at your typical company, let's say wherever you guys go to work, let's say you go to work for a typical company, what skill is going to get you into a management position? Execution or innovation? Execution is going to get you into a management position, right? You got to be good at this. This is what's good. This is what gets you into the management tournament. Now you got to rise to the top of the pyramid, right? What skill is going to move you up the pyramid? Say, actually, you don't get better at execution as you move up. In fact, we show you actually become, it's not significant finding, but we actually find that people that move up aren't necessarily better at execution, but what they're better at is the innovation stuff. So once you get into the management tournament, if you want to move up, then you better help figure out where we should go next as a company. Those skills are going to differentiate you. So even if you're an E, that's great, that's fine. Even if you say, that's my core competence, that's great, that's fine. But be aware that the differentiator from you from other E's that are going to also be selected in a management position might be these innovation skills we're talking about. Okay. And that's one of the reasons why CEOs of these innovative companies spend 31% of their time on innovation, hunting for new ideas, engaging these skills, compared to only 15% of time for people at the less innovative companies. So innovation takes time. Coming up with new ideas doesn't just happen. You got to have time. You got to be out there observing. You got to be networking. You also have to spend time just meditating. A lot of these folks say they have like certain spots where they get good ideas. Most frequently mentioned place for good ideas? The shower. Yeah, you read it. I was surprised, but that was the shower is like the place. So I don't know if that's your go-to place for ideas, just sit in the shower and think. Where for whatever reason you're doodling over a problem, but it could be walks, it could be like at night just laying in bed. A lot of people had different places where they came up with ideas. Yes?
So if we wanted to get someone, sorry, this is like something you talked about before, but like we wanted to have other people around us take this assessment. How do we do that? Do we just have to keep paying for our assessments?
So you mean if you wanted to do a 360 assessment? So we do have 360 assessments, and that's a separate product. So you could check with me, and we could let you know how that happens. This is what you all experienced is relatively new. So we don't have the 360 version of that one yet. It's an older. It gives you the same data. It's just not nearly as cool. So, yes.
Can you give us an idea of what, like, being in the 90th percentile, what score that would be?
A 90th percentile score for, I mean, across the board. If you're 90th percentile, you're probably at 6.5 or higher, average. That's very high. Yeah, you'd have to be really high. And by the way, you are all in what we call our high performance management database. So you're being compared with people mostly in executive programs at Wharton and INSEAD and top companies in management, because those are the folks that will pay for this. So you are being compared with a very, very talented peer group. So if you're average, it means you're actually doing really well compared to the world. I'm actually glad you brought that up. But it is a very, very talented peer group that you're being compared to. I mean, let's face it, you have people in this database like Jeff Bezos and Scott Cook and Michael Dell and others like that. All right, let me just share one last thing. So we developed this innovation premium methodology to rank companies based upon whether investors are anticipating new innovations that will produce new income streams. We call this an innovation premium. It's the premium that's paid above the value of the company's current cash flows. And you'll learn more about this later in the class. But let me just share Steve Jobs' tenure, 37% innovation premium. All right, that's what it was when he started it out. He comes along, you read about the fan, he comes up with the idea for the fan, he comes up with the idea for the first Mac, drop-down menus, he comes up with beautiful calligraphy. All of those things are really important to Apple's success early on. He leaves, and it becomes an innovation discount. In other words, investors are expecting the company market value to shrink by 30%. Well, while he's gone, they have 3 CEOs. This is their product, their primary product when he leaves. While he's gone, they introduce all of these new models, and they finally jump up to the 5200 from the 640 here. I'm going to show you what that product looks like. Now that's an innovation. Can you see the big leap from here to here, all of those different models? That was the problem with Apple when Steve Jobs was gone. He comes back, and all of a sudden we get iMac, iPod, iTunes, iPhone, Apple TV, iPad. If you're a lover of Star Wars, maybe instead of saying Steve Jobs returns, this should be the return of the Jobs eye. Because all of a sudden we get all of this new innovative stuff going on, and look what happens to the innovation premium. All right, so leadership really matters in innovative companies. And we'll talk more about that and why this is maybe important for you because you have aspirations to be a leader in your organization. Oh yes, Mark Gottfredson, founder of the Dallas office of Bain, will be here on Friday. We'll send out an email telling the sponsors to get an RSVP to see how many can come. But Mark he's really good. very, very senior guy. And we'd like all of you to come, and as I mentioned in the email, we'll give class participation points to everybody.